Saints running back depth behind Alvin Kamara, the New Orleans Saints O-line rotation, and Foster Moreau stepping up at tight end. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the title of today's video on Off the Bench Saints with Jacob Hester. Ross Jackson is featured on this video. Let's go ahead and listen, react like only I can do.
Hey, buddy, doing great. Thanks so much for having me on, man. Always a pleasure to be here with you.
Excited for my first question because we're actually talking running backs. Now, not excited with why we're talking running backs, but, you know, it's a position that doesn't get talked about a lot. So we'll start here with the New Orleans Saints. Alvin Kamara looks like he, maybe could potentially hold out into training camp. Contract situation not looking great for either side right now. What's the latest you're hearing with Alvin Kamara, maybe where he stands?
So we covered the contract in detail. I'm not sure when this video was filmed, but there may be a holdout period. There may be some negotiations, but I don't think this is going to get in the way of any legitimate playing time. Like, I don't think Kamara is going to potentially miss any regular season games, or this going to go long enough to where it affects the regular season. Bottom line is, AK-41 doesn't want to play next season for $0 guaranteed dollars. That's it. So what will probably happen is the Saints will probably give him a 3-ish year, $30-ish million contract with 70-ish% of that guaranteed, if I had to guess. Maybe that's a little high on the guaranteed, but there will be guaranteed money. It might be incentive-laden. Who the hell knows? But there will be a deal worked out. I don't blame Kamara for not wanting to play for no guaranteed money at his age and at his position. So don't blame him. Don't blame the Saints for not just jumping at paying him immediately. There will be obviously negotiations of what they can do with the contract, with the money. The Saints have to manipulate the cap, but I don't think this is that big of a deal.
Yeah, biggest thing, there's probably not going to be much movement on this over the course of the next, little bit of time. This might be a thing that extends into training camp just by virtue of when are people all in the same vicinity again, especially with training camp happening out in California. That might literally be the next opportunity Alvin Kamara has to sign a contract. Now, of course, they could certainly get things done during this break and stuff like that, and certainly make progress. So that's probably what you're looking for right now is when do we get the update that there has been some progress made towards getting a deal done and things like that. So that's kind of what we're going to be watching for here over the next little bit. But this doesn't seem like it's as big a hurdle as maybe it's being made out to be outside of the facility. I imagine inside the facility, this one's not entirely as challenging as maybe people expect.
Yeah. So you look at it from afar, Ross, and you're like, okay, AK 3.9 yards per carry, had a ton of catches, but not really a ton of yards to match those catches. I think he averaged a little bit over 6 yards per catch. And so like some of the production has slipped, but also like if you're in AK's camp, you can be like, well, the offense was stale. They were basically only going to run one running play. They didn't have, a lot of diversity in the run game. The offensive line was not great, as we know, a year ago. And so, like, new offensive lineman, you draft one in the first round. You got a new offensive coordinator. You're thinking your production can get back up to maybe not where, your peak was, but somewhere in between. Like, which one do you think the Saints are looking at right now? Is it a declining running back because 30 is the graveyard age for running backs, unfortunately? Like, where does, his leverage, I guess, where does that stand because he's not coming off his best year?
I think his leverage is just him saying, look, I can be a top 10 back, so pay me like a top 10 back. And I agree. He probably can be a top 10 back, and his real leverage exists in the fact that he is the exact back that they want for the system. The fact that he can do what Kubiak wants his running back to do, the fact that he is a mirror image skill set wise of Christian McCaffrey, that is huge. If he was Jerome Bettis, he wouldn't have any leverage because it's like, well, you're not even really fitting what we want to do. We're already going to have to move you around to do the kind of plays that we want to do. So you're kind of already falling out of favor, but Kamara fits us perfectly. So the decision really kind of is with Kubiak, where if Kubiak's like, look, this is the guy that I need. I want this guy on this team. He is perfect for what I want to do. Then pay him. Keep him around. And I think Alvin is. I think he should be paid top 10-ish money because he is a top 10-ish back. He's in that 8's low, but he's in that $8 to $11 million range. which puts him in that like 9th, 8th-ish paid running back in the NFL, and that's about right, especially for what he's already done for the team and what he means to the team. And you got to factor in all that. You got to factor in, and I don't mean paying somebody for their past achievements. I mean paying your leader, like paying a guy who has locker room influence, paying a core member of your team. There is value in keeping a veteran voice around with young players. Like we don't have maybe Kendra Miller will be this, but we don't have like a Jahmyr Gibbs. We don't have someone who is like, okay, it's obvious he will take the load. Like it's obvious he will eventually be the workhorse back. Kendra Miller might be that one day, but he had 180 yards rushing last year. We don't know yet. So we'll pay Kamara a couple of years with the deal that I outlined. See what he can do in the Kubiak system. I mean, for what I think, this system is perfect for him. So if he has a renaissance season, a career year like I see happening, then paying him $9 million a year, what else are you going to do?
Yeah, I think you're trying to balance the two. I mean, look, the fact of the matter is that beyond, the 3.9 yards per carry, you also had a guy who, wasn't able to gain more than 2.4 yards before being contacted because of the play of the offensive line in front of him, or not necessarily even because of the play of the offensive line in front of him, but because of where he was being asked to run. I mean, you go back to 2022, we're talking about a guy that is a get him on the outside, get him out in space kind of back, and he only ran out of his 220-plus rushes. 83 of them went to the outside, were outside zone.
Complete disaster.
That's not the way you were typically used to seeing Alvin Kamara utilized. You go back to last year, it was the first time in 3 years that he's had a negative air yards total. His average air yards per pass came down to minus 0.01, and he only had -9 air yards by the time the season
that's crazy.
Was done. Typically, he's in the 60 to 70 range there because they're also targeting him downfield. So it just kind of goes to show you
bananas.
Where the target distribution was, what the run distribution was, and how that didn't really complement his game. So you have to balance that as an organization, understanding, hey, there's a new offense coming in, but at the same time, you have to safeguard yourself from the decline, right? You don't have to look at him as a declining asset right now, but you do have to still safeguard yourself for the 2-3 years, 1 or 2 years, however it is that they want to look at it. So I think that.
I mean, I feel like it's the same conversation we've had with Carr, where, I'm saying pay Kamara top 10-ish money. We're talking, again, like $9 million a year, somewhere in there. And then the rebuttal will be, well, he's an aging player. Well, he's not a superstar anymore. Well, he's not Christian McCaffrey. Well, his glory days are behind him. It's like, I agree with all that. I'm not saying give him 5 years, $90 million. Like, I'm not saying pay him this like franchise running back MVP level numbers. I'm not saying pay him like Christian McCaffrey. I'm not saying pay him like Jonathan Taylor. Like, I agree. But you do have to pay players. Like you do have to roster players. And so I think paying Kamara is okay. Like paying him, you can pay him and say, like, yeah, his break tackle numbers are pretty low. Yeah, he's not great between the tackles. Yeah, he is on the wrong side of the the peak of his career or whatever. Like, all that can be true, but you can still get value for the money. You can still get value for giving him 8, 9, 10, $11 million. 11 is kind of high, but 8, 9, 10.
That's going to be the balance, is not looking at him as a declining asset now, but being aware that any running back in today's NFL is going to be seen as a declining asset once they get past that 29 year of age. So you kind of have to.
It's way before that. You could say they're a declining asset about 20 at about 26.
So look at both of those things if you're the organization, but don't have to treat him as a down commodity now.
Ross, let's, hypothetical worst case scenario that, AK is just like, you know what, I'm not playing for that contract. I feel like I'm more valuable than that. I'm going to sit this thing out and maybe it lasts into camp. Now, I don't think it's going to happen. Doesn't sound like you do either, but let's say it does.
Okay.
Like Kendra Miller going to be like, would he be RB1 and then Williams would kind of be, hey, that'll be your change of pace guy, and you're going to have stuff with Taysom ready to go, but would it be Kendra Miller, RB1, we're going to run the offense through him? Do you think that's the way the Saints would approach that?
I think it would have to be situational. I think it would have to be like the design of the play. You're not going to ask Jamal Williams to do something you need Kendra Miller to do. You're not going to ask Kendra Miller to do something Jamal Williams is going to do. You're not going to ask Taysom to do something that, so if you were in a situation like that where Kamara's not available, I don't think you can just say like, okay, Jamal is RB1. Like, what does that mean? In today's NFL, and I've talked about this before too, but it's the same thing with like the NBA, where 20 years ago, a point guard was a point guard. A center was a center, right? A center, you could draw the center. They were all the same. You could say, all right, he's probably 7 feet tall. He's probably a little bit slower. He's probably, not a great shooter. He's probably not a great ball handler, but he's probably good at rebounds and he's good under the basket. He's got a post game, right? Now a center could be 6'9" with a jump shot, 190 pounds. Like now it's totally different. The position doesn't define the player. Same with the NFL now, where RB1 doesn't define what they're doing. RB1 20 years ago means they're getting 30 carries a game. Now your RB1 could get 12 carries, where your RB2 gets 10 carries, and RB2 also gets 6 receptions. So if that's the case, who actually is RB1, right? So I wouldn't get too lost in like who's starting, who's the RB1, who's the this, who's the that. It's more about the actual usage and the design of the plays they're being used for. I don't think, same with Jamal last year. I didn't think there was any reason to force Jamal Williams to get like 8-9 carries a game, especially if you're putting him on the field and making him do things that Alvin would be better doing, or making him do things that Taysom would be better doing. Like, it drove me crazy to see Jamal Williams on the field on third down running routes. Should he get snaps? Sure. But he shouldn't get snaps that he's like the second best option at doing the job. He shouldn't be getting the snap on third down if he's running a route. If he's the better pass blocker and he's in there to pass block, no doubt, absolutely, I'm all for it. We would start the game so many times. We would start a game with Jamal Williams as the starting running back, run him on first down in between the tackles, and he'd get 0 yards. Why? One, why is he even doing that? Why are you starting the game like that? 2, you can't run the football. So what's the purpose of putting him in to just fall forward? To start your game? Like, it drove me crazy.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in that scenario, it's where you have to make a drastic decision like that. I imagine you go to Kendra. Kendra's got the play style to be able to do it. The biggest thing is, can he stay healthy, lead back for a full 17 games? I'll throw Jordan Mims and James Robinson into the mix too, because, the Saints would want to have a third guy in that rotation. And both of those players are really, really good fits for what Clint Kubiak's offense is trying to do. The other thing that kind of works in the counter, give Alvin Kamara the extension argument, is that, we've seen this wide zone system now elevate non-marquee running backs in this league. I know we're watching it with Christian McCaffrey right now, but, we've watched it with guys who were not household names and who became household names, like Jeff Wilson. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, I agree 100% with that. And that's more of what I'm talking about with the like a system fit versus just RB1. If there is a player, like let's say there is someone who exists that fits what you want your running back to do if you're Clint Kubiak. And let's say Jordan Mims is that person. We're just going to completely make this up. Let's say you're watching Jordan Mims and you're like, man, his hands are about just as good as Kamara. He's just as good in space. Like, he can do what we're asking him to do. The system does kind of just allow you to, as long as it's a puzzle piece fit, as long as it fits the scheme, you can just kind of roll whoever in there. That's why the Dolphins had the success they had. It's not because Raheem Mostert and A-Chain are that good. It's because it's just kind of the system. Like, are they good? Sure. But would they be that good if they were running the football last year for the Saints? No, obviously not. Right? So there is some credence to that, where it's same with the offensive line, which is my whole argument this entire offseason, where with a system that is so scheme dependent and so skill based, as far as like what skills do you have, do those skills fit this system? If you do have a running back that is similar to Kamara and you feel like can do the job, do what's asked of you to the same-ish level, there might be credence in like, okay, well, we're not going to pay Alvin to do that. But I don't know if the Saints believe they have that in the building just yet.
Like, we've seen the system work for those guys. Kyron Williams was another one from last year we saw out in Los Angeles. And so, being able to find these other guys like Jordan Mims and James Robinson, these are important steps regardless, like whether or not Alvin Kamara is in your building, even with Alvin Kamara in the building, you got to have those guys ready on the practice squad. So I've put them in that conversation too, to be able to add to that backfield if the worst case scenario were to happen.
That's why the last couple of years I've liked like Zach Charbonnet coming out of UCLA. I liked Blake Corum coming out of Michigan, because it's like, are they ready to be bell cow backs right now in the old sense of the word? Probably not. But do they have the skill set to kind of step in and do what some of these marquee backs are doing? Yeah, they do. So I would love to have players like that on my roster. I think because running back is a very unique thing right now, where running backs don't get drafted high. It's like one running back might get taken in the first round every year, but that's really about it. And then the rest of them are just kind of third, fourth, fifth round, and you see what happens. You can have a running back in college who runs for 2,000 yards a season. He's a fourth-round draft pick. It's like, how the hell did this happen? You can have a running back like Blake Corum have one of the best college careers possible, and he's just a total afterthought. So I like the idea of picking up those super talented guys who have dominated at the college level, having them on the roster for these kind of conversations, where this conversation is really intriguing if Blake Corum's on your team and you drafted Blake Corum, where it's like, well, let's see what the hell he can do in training camp and minicamp. And if he's got the skill set, and I'm saying Blake Corum, but it can be anyone of that pedigree, where it's like, let's see what he can do. Let's see his skill set. Does it fit this scheme? And maybe we do let the rookie run. Maybe we do try and do this with a rookie contract at running back versus $10, $11, $12 million at running back. Work for the Chiefs with Isaiah Pacheco, is working with the Rams with Kyron Williams. So, that would be worth a conversation if that back was on the team. You could argue and say Kendra Miller is that back, but Kendra has the wrinkle of, can he stay healthy? Kendra has that variable of, okay, well, we can't put all of our eggs in this basket because this basket only ran for 170 yards last year because this basket was hurt.
I mean, it's a great point, Ross. I mean, they ran, I believe, outside zone 44% of the time last year in San Francisco as far as like their runs. I mean, they are an outside zone team.
Yeah.
And so I assume that's going to continue in New Orleans, like you mentioned. I mean, branches of this offense in LA and other places, that's what they do as well. And so, then it brings up your next question. Like, you feel pretty good. Fuaga, left side, let's run outside zone. What about over on the right side to Trevor Penning? Like, how has he looked? Maybe has the narrative changed a little bit in a positive way for Trevor Penning? What does he look like as we sit here at the end of June?
One of Trevor Penning's best attributes is run blocking. Maybe his only positive attribute right now in his career is that he's a good run blocker. So if that's what he's called to do, and he doesn't have to pass block for 6-7 seconds like Pete Carmichael was asking him to do, I could see the narrative changing around. I could for sure see. Y'all hear this? Y'all hear monster truck going on outside? Jesus, I'm trying to prop up the fastest rising channel in New Orleans sports media, really just in sports media in general. And I've got Travis Pastrana outside right now doing triple backflips off of the high rises.
I think the narrative has changed in a positive way for him in that you're not still watching him struggle to do the same thing. There's now sort of like this built-in kind of, okay, he needs more time because he's learning a brand new position kind of outlook. So it's kind of helpful in terms of, the criticism that might be showering down on Trevor Penning. Otherwise, he was still playing left tackle and not fitting in. And so I think there was a wise decision by the Saints. It also helps to kind of equalize the offensive line. Everybody's learning something new this year. And I think that helps to kind of equalize these guys quite a bit, which is a good thing for Penning as well. I can't say that he's made, major progress now that he's over at right tackle. That would be unfair of me to say because all that we've seen is OTAs and mini camps where no one's trying to have too much contact with anybody and all these other things. So we'll really find that out once the pads go on at training camp, joint practices, and then, of course, preseason as we get into the regular season. So we'll be able to get a much better sort of barometer on where he is in terms of his progress. But I think that if he's going to find progress, this might be the way to get it done. So I don't think it was the wrong decision at all to make this move, and it certainly sets up.
Seems like it's been the right move.
Lesser expectations, but maybe a greater potential of development, learning something new while also having to learn something new when it comes to the scheme.
There was also something to be said about last year, Trevor Penning. The pressure on Trevor Penning was, hey, you're a first-round pick. You're playing left tackle. We need you to be like a cornerstone left tackle, a very important position. Now I think the pressure is closer to like, hey, just be a serviceable right tackle. Like, be a guy who's really good at run blocking and maybe kind of average at pass blocking. Be that. That's okay. That's good enough. So there is something to be said about the pressures or the expectations being lowered from, we need you to be a 12-year all-pro left tackle protecting the blind side. We need that. You know what? Forget that. Just be a mauler, run-blocking specialist who, when asked, can do a good enough job pass blocking in this very unique scheme where give us an average pass block for 2 seconds while the play develops and all that happens, and then we can get back to run blocking. So if that's the case for Trevor, and if that's what his role is now, and that allows him to be serviceable for this team, yeah, it was a great move to take him from left tackle to right tackle.
Talking New Orleans Saints with our guy, Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints podcast. All right, let's go to another position room.
All right.
The tight end room. It actually, it felt like it was a real strength for you. You had Juwan Johnson, you had Foster Moreau, and obviously you had Taysom Hill. You had an undrafted free agent rookie that you felt pretty good about. And then, one injury, as we know in the NFL, because the rosters are different than they are in college football, it can make you sweat a little bit. Juwan Johnson, he's got a foot issue, going to be out sometime. So that moves Foster Moreau to be your tight end one. So a room that you kind of felt good about. Now the depth is kind of being challenged right now. Yeah. Where's Juwan Johnson? Do you expect him to be back for camp? And if he's not, are you going to count on an undrafted free agent rookie that they seem high on to be able to fill in maybe as your tight end too?
Yeah, I think that would be the case if Juwan Johnson's not ready to go. I've been given a variety of different timelines, and they all kind of fall towards the middle of training camp or so. And so it's tough because even in that case, you rejoin your team during training camp in the middle of it all, and then you have a ramp-up in acclimation period, so that's going to take a week or two. Everything like that. So how much do you really get going? So the expectation has still been that Juwan Johnson will be ready to go week one, but to what extent is going to be the question, right? How much?
And foot injuries are tough. Lower body injuries for running backs, tight ends, wide receivers are very difficult because you basically can't do anything while you're healing. Then you get weaker, slower. Then you got to ramp up physically on top of ramping up to then, it's one thing to be conditioned. There's another thing to be conditioned for the NFL. So, it's very different. I mean, I'm sure many of y'all, if you've tweaked something, working out or playing a sport or what have you, you take 3 weeks off, you go back in there, it's like, damn, I feel like I've never done this before. Then it takes 2 weeks to ramp back up. And then finally, a month after you're back, you're kind of sort of doing what you were doing, but you're certainly probably not as strong or as fast or as good or sharp or whatever. So it really is crazy how, and that is, that's for everyone. Then you throw into older veteran players where it's harder to obviously bounce back the older you get and all that. I know they're NFL players, they have and I'm not saying that's more just a hypothetical. I'm not saying Foster or Juwan or any of these guys are Rip Van Winkle. I'm not saying they're 300 years old, but it's super hard. I mean, we saw Brandon Ingram for the Pelicans really struggle because he was out with a lower body injury. He came back. You could tell he was not ramped up to play, and it took him a month before he even got close to back. And by that time, the season was already over.
Much time did he get to practice? How's he doing in terms of his conditioning? How is his acclimation? How's his recovery? So those are all going to be things that they'll have to gauge to see just how involved he is at the beginning of the season. But if he's not able to go, I think undrafted free agent Dallin Holker, coming most recently out of Colorado State, has been the guy that's been the most impressive at the position. Outside of Foster Moreau, is actually he looks like he's bulked up quite a bit and has been making some really, really nice catches.
Never wrong to be strong
as well. And he's the guy that I think you get on the field a lot more in Foster Moreau because he can play that true inline, true wide type as a blocker and as a pass catcher. And that's really important in terms of just simply being able to get out onto the field. And so I think that probably those two would be kind of your core tandem. But look, guys like Michael Jacobson, who was on the practice squad last year, has had some impressive moments. They just brought in and signed Jesper Horsted, who spent 2020 and 2021 with Clancy Barone, who's now the tight ends coach here while he was in Chicago. It's been 2022 with Derek Carr with the Raiders. So, he's got a lot of kind of connections with all these guys. And so that could be a way that they go to help supplement some additional maybe third tight end snaps if needed, if Juwan Johnson's not ready to go. But I think the bigger question for Juwan is going to be when he does return, can he keep the momentum up that he had at the end of last year? 219 of his 368 receiving yards last year all came in the last 4 games of the season.
Yeah, the Tampa game. Like the Tampa game, it was like, where the hell has this been? Like the Tampa game alone, it was like, man, if Juwan Johnson would play like this the whole season, he might have been an all-pro.
Last season. So can he keep that momentum going despite this injury, which could cause a little bit of a hiccup in terms of carrying that production over?
Shout out to my guy Clancy. He was a tight end coach in San Diego and Denver. Had him in a couple different spots. Great coach. Love having him down in New Orleans. All right, so Foster Moreau, a guy that if he has to play, he's got a great connection with the quarterback, Derek Carr, their time in Oakland and Vegas and now here in New Orleans. And let's go ahead and get to the Derek Carr portion of the interview to wrap up here. Everyone seems to like what they've seen so far from him in the offseason. Now, as you laid out, OTAs, minicamp, that's
early.
Not the regular season. That is not regular practice even, because it's a little bit more relaxed. You have no threat of getting touched, and Derek Carr is making the most of that. But Ross, obviously you know football incredibly well. Have you seen things that make you believe that when the bullets start to fly a little bit, it does become live, that he's going to make those improvements?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the thing that gives me the most optimism or the most positivity when it comes to something like that was really the last 2 days of minicamps. As you know, Jake, minicamp OTAs, you're not making decisions, but you're gathering a lot of information. You're learning a lot of stuff. And so, and that goes for the players as well as, of course, the coaching staff, organization, all that. So it's information gathering all around. I think the thing that you really learned and that I really enjoyed seeing was in the last 2 days, the Saints did some situational one drive, end of half or end of game situation type drills. 58 seconds to get down the field at the end of the half to take a lead, a minute, 15 seconds at the end of a game to get down the field to score and get a win, or at least extend the lead. And in both of those cases, Derek Carr marched the team down the field to not get a field goal, but score a touchdown, and in one case get a 2-point conversion to extend the lead to 3, in another score the touchdown and be able to get what would be a simulated win in that game situation. And the reason why I highlight that is, again, it's minicamp. It's not the regular season. But look, if you can't do that in minicamp, there's no reason to believe you're going to be able to do that.
True. I mean, if you're not successful in the simulations and minicamp and OTAs and training camp and preseason, why would you believe you can be successful in the regular season?
And then on top of that, to be able to get in and out of the huddle quickly, cleanly, no huddle, hurry up situation, up-tempo situation with a brand new offensive play calling rhythm, a brand new offensive scheme, and run it without issue, then that really kind of gives you a little bit of a glimpse and should give you some positivity in terms of how quickly this system seems to be setting in for that first team offense.
Great point. So the fact that this is all happening so early shows the comfortability, word of the day, that everyone has with this offense. And it's very important for Carr to be comfortable. He showed that last year. The more comfortable he is with the plays, more comfortable he is with his teammates, more comfortable he is with all of that, the better he's going to be. When things start to get out of control, when players start to yell at each other, when there's infighting, when there's miscommunication, when the offensive line doesn't know what the quarterback's doing, when the quarterback doesn't know what the wide receivers are doing, when the coaches don't know what's going on, that's when we saw the Saints really stall out. That's when we saw the worst version of the Saints. When all that went away at the end of the season, when everyone seemed to get more comfortable with each other and more comfortable with what they were trying to do, that's when we saw, like, okay, maybe this team can win. Maybe this team can be good. So if we're already seeing that, and I love how comfortable seems with his teammates, how comfortable he seems with his surroundings and New Orleans and his role and all of that. Now, you start 1-5, all that goes out the window. So you got to win. You got to start hot. You got to win. All this positivity, all this, team building, all this rah-rah, all this, best friends, BFF for life. That's all cool in training camp. But you start 2-6, you start updating your LinkedIn resume real quick. So Saints got to start fast, 100%.
All right, there he is, Ross Jackson. Ross Jackson, NOLA is his handle on Twitter. Give him a follow there. Catch him on Locked On Saints podcast. Ross, you're the man. We appreciate your time. As always, enjoy the rest of your day.
Wow.
Good stuff. Yeah, a little off-season minicamp update for you guys. Good stuff from Jacob Hester and Ross Jackson on Off the Bench Saints on ESPN 104.5. Ladies and gentlemen, get on down in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.